Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, China reaffirming its support for Russia. This just one day after President Trump warned of a 100% tariff on countries trading with Moscow. Beijing is strengthening military ties with a key European partner. For the first time, China and Serbia, a close ally of Russia, will hold a joint military drill. The Pentagon is reportedly asking allies if they would support the U.S. if Taiwan comes under attack. We took a look at where key European nations may stand. For the third time this year, NVIDIA CEO is returning to China for a visit to restart sales of select AI chips. But with no final U.S.-China trade deal in sight, how much longer will Washington keep the door open? China is reinforcing its relationship with Russia, just as the U.S. and NATO consider new rounds of sanctions on Moscow. On Tuesday, Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Beijing. Xi called for stronger mutual support between the two countries. The meeting came just one day after President Trump urged Putin to accept a ceasefire deal to end the war in Ukraine. On Monday, Trump warned that if no peace deal is reached within 50 days, the U.S. will impose 100% tariffs on any country doing business with Russia.
And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple. And they'll be at 100%.
The 100% tariffs target Russia's top trading partners, China and India. Zooming in on China, in April and May, the U.S. imposed a 145% tariff on Chinese goods, sharply limiting Chinese exports to the U.S. Now, the situation could get even tougher if China sides with Russia. China currently faces a 55% U.S. tariff. If President Trump moves forward with a 10% tariff on BRICS countries, plus a 100% tariff on countries trading with Russia, China's tariffs could soar to 165%. Beyond economic sanctions, President Trump on Monday pledged to sell advanced weapons to NATO to support Ukraine. NATO Chief Mark Rutte said several wealthy European countries, including Germany, are ready to foot the bill. And U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen says the U.S. must double down with tougher, faster sanctions on Russia. Watch.
We need to ramp up the pressure in every way we can on Russia, and so we need to take up the Graham-Blumenthal sanctions bill. As you say, it has 85 bipartisan co-sponsors. It will send a very strong message, not just to Russia, but to China, to India, to those countries who are funding Russia's war machine, that it's time to stop. We are serious. Vladimir Putin needs to come to the table. He needs to understand that it's time to end this war.
Under mounting pressure, here's Russia's foreign minister's response during his visit to China on Tuesday.
We, after all, an unprecedented number of sanctions against us have already been announced, and we are coping. I have no doubt that we will cope with new sanctions.
Veteran China analyst Alan Zhang says Russia and China don't seem likely to back down from U.S. pressure. He says for authoritarian regimes, standing tough against the West is key to maintaining political stability. Beijing and Moscow declared an unlimited friendship just before Russia launched its war against Ukraine. As tensions among global powers continue to escalate, we're taking a closer look at the Trump administration's strategic approach toward Russia, Ukraine, and China. We spoke with foreign affairs analyst Gerard Filitti, also a political strategist and attorney, to break it down. While meeting with NATO's Mark Rutte, Trump explained how the U.S. will sell the EU weapons, which can then be used to help defend Ukraine. How are you reading this? Does this free up the U.S. to focus on the Indo-Pacific and China?
In many ways it does. I think America's focus is increasingly becoming on the Indo-Pacific and especially on China. We have seen even this past weekend some very aggressive moves made by the communist Chinese government, exhibiting new types of tanks and new types of warfare devices that could be a threat to Taiwan and Taiwan's ability to remain separate from the mainland. Ultimately, the United States is more interested in what's going on in China and countering that threat. However, the situation in Ukraine remains very pressing because it's drawing our NATO allies into the conflict. It's drawing NATO resources into the conflict, and it's a very real and existential threat to democracy and stability in Europe. It's good for the United States to be able to focus more on China right now and rely on Europe, which has a lot more experience dealing both with Ukraine and Russia, to take the primary lead in this conflict.
How is Beijing likely viewing this major announcement from Trump today?
I think Beijing is viewing it with a little bit of concern. I think that they have for many years been able to coerce American foreign policy interests with distractions, whether it was in the Middle East with Iran, whether it's in Europe, whether it is ever expanding Russian aggression that is ultimately being aided by China as the more senior partner in Russia's adventurism. I think it shows that President Trump is realizing and understanding the actual threat to American democracy and to global freedom comes from communist China, and the focus increasingly on China and not Ukraine, not Gaza, not Iran is bad for the Chinese government. So I think that they are viewing this with concern. They're viewing this as something that is more of an existential threat to them and their regime, especially because right now their economy is increasingly not doing well, and economic pressure on top from the Trump administration is actually bringing consequences within the Chinese Communist government.
And expanding on that, what is at stake here in terms of geopolitics?
At stake is really the future of the Western and Eastern world. It's the future of global democracy. We're increasingly coming to a point where we see military conflicts where there normally would not be any. Russia invading Ukraine is a prelude or a preamble to other countries, China and Pakistan going at it, or China and India, India and Pakistan. We're seeing China adventurism increasingly threaten Taiwan. We're seeing the Philippines becoming increasingly concerned, as they should be, with Chinese expansionism. All of this shows that we're living in times now that are more uncertain than ever, and countries are increasingly willing to stake using military force where before they haven't. They've used diplomacy or they've used threats of violence. So what's really at stake is focus. It's for the United States to focus on its alliances, on its friendships, and to maintain the stability and peace in regions of the world that long have relied on American force being there when needed.
Definitely a lot at stake. Gerard Filitti, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. You can catch the full episode on Genjing World every Tuesday. To watch, simply click the link in the description box down below or search China in Focus at genjingworld.com.